Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Samwise Yaboinsky podcast. My name is Chris, and I'm here with Sam. Hello, Sam.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, really excited for today. We'll talk about our guest in just a little bit, but I wanted to remind everybody of our name, the Samwise Yaboinsky podcast. Samwise is sort of my name for our very own Sam Foster in honor of Samwise Gamgee. Gamgee.
It's Gamgee. It's Samwise Gamgee, I believe.
Samwise Gamgee, who was in The Lord of the Rings in so many ways, so crucial, so pivotal, just like our very own Sam is all over the life of the church, doing such an incredible job, especially now adding to his hyphenate job description, podcast host and truth bomb dropper.
And because of my hairy feet. My hairy feet is a big part of it.
And the possessor of truly hairy feet. And then Yaboinsky is my family name in the original Polish. Somebody told me that's what our name was pronounced way back in the old country. And I only just learned that it means apple tree,
Really?
Which has always been my favorite fruit.
Oh.
And then I only just found out just recently that there's a good reason for it. So that's very exciting. But this is our podcast with the First Church in Belmont, and we bring on incredible people in our community, and we get to know them, hear a little bit of their backstory. And today is another fascinating story. Nate Sellers, who is our children's religious education director and has been so crucial to our digital ministry and our response to the pandemic, has created so many of the videos that we've shared, is just a visionary storyteller and just so creative and really a joy to work with. He's here and we get to hear a little bit of his fascinating story, a lot of which I didn't know. Did you know all of the stories now?
No, I didn't know all of it, no.
Yeah,
he's a fascinating guy. He's got to live through a lot of things. He has a lot to say.
So it's a real treat. So we'll dive right into it. So here is Nate. All right, well, welcome, Nate. We're so grateful to have you on.
Welcome,
now
Nate.
We can't even count how many guests.
Thank you,
we're
guys.
so deeply into this process by now. But it has been one of the great joys, really, of especially these last 2 years. Like, it was always fun to work with you. And early on, it was fun because of all of your stories. And I had always been the story motor of religious institutions and so being able to partner with you and all of your creativity and working so closely was really fun. But it was really, I mean, words are hard to come by to say how grateful I am for the depth and the just ocean of work you poured into our community during the first phase of the pandemic. Now also,
thanks,
but
Chris.
really above and beyond. I was just looking back at the videos because we issued a couple reruns at the beginning of the church year as we were getting ready for this new phase. And I just saw that first week was Ian and I with like 2 days just throwing together some videos. And literally the very next week with no notice, you had achieved a kind of identity almost for the whole pandemic video digital ministry. It was really wild. And so many times when I talk to colleagues who are just pulling their hair out and really struggling to meet this moment, and they'd ask me about what we've been doing, I'm like, well, I kind of got this guy. who just happens to be a digital filmmaker with all of this experience and creativity who understands. So it's an incredible gift, everything you have done even before this, but especially in the pandemic. It's really been totally nuts. So I'm just really, really, really grateful.
Thanks, Chris. That's so nice of you to say. It's, as you know, I've told you many times, it's such a joy to work with you because it's a team effort. And with Ian and you, it's just so easy to put these videos together. Even though they're time consuming, it's just, it's such a joy to meet up, in the middle of the week and just kind of throw ideas out and see what sticks and then collect all those ideas and then put something together. So it's been my pleasure, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and so we'll get to sort of this next phase and some of the fun stuff that we have coming up, but wanted to, hear a little bit of the backstory too. Part of what's been really fun in these podcasts is getting to know folks and hearing a little bit of how they landed. So how did you find Unitarian Universalism way back when?
Well, I went to a evangelical Christian college, and I grew up a born-again Christian, you could say. And I was in a theology class with a really bright professor, Professor Flett, and he started talking to us about Karl Barth and then about Paul Tillich and Howard Thurman, and it was inevitable that universalism would pop up with those theologians. And so slowly I started studying their work and I became very interested, and it was sort of taboo. And it was covered in a real broad way, not like it's an option, but this is kind of the direction that these intellectuals, these academics kind of lean towards or grew towards. And so I started learning about universalism, and then I started studying biblical hermeneutics and realized that the Pauline letters are kind of binitarian. They're not Trinitarian. And
really?
Very focused on not really this idea of separating God and Father and Spirit. That's just one thing. God is Spirit. And so once I understood that, I was like, oh, there's variation. And then I started realizing that there is Unitarianism all the way back to like 200 AD.
Yeah.
And you could even say further, but organized all the way back then. And so that got me thinking like, wow, this is interesting that there's a whole sect or communities that believed in Unitarianism and Universalism. There's individuals that believe in Universalism. And so that got me to kind of question a lot of stuff that I grew up believing. And then when I went to seminary, it was about a time that I started becoming a humanist, and I actually went to seminary with a lot of UUs, and it was a UCC seminary in Lancaster, but I just became interested and questioning, excuse me, I just have to clear my throat, excuse me, just asking them questions about their beliefs, and soon they basically pointed me to a UU church that needed someone to basically recreate their CRE curriculum. So that's how I basically got into a church, is just started striking conversations with some UUs at the seminary I was attending. Then I found myself rewriting a bunch of curriculum for their RE program. And then I just kind of got looped in, and it was the right time because myself, I was becoming a humanist. I was studying world religions. My master's is in global religious phenomena. Wow. And I worked as a youth minister for 4 years before I was in seminary. So it just kind of really worked out, finding myself at this place and working with these kids and with these the youth team. And so it just started in undergrad, and it just kind of slowly formed until I was literally in a church working on RE curriculum. And so. And when
you say becoming a humanist, I mean, at the time you were raised a theist, right?
Yes.
And so was that, so. I mean, when you went in, where did you think you were going to be ending up? Did you have any idea where you thought you were landing?
Yeah. So, and so when you say went in, are you talking about seminary? Yeah, seminary. Yeah. So I would say that I was a humanist at that point. I was studying the way of wanting to be an academic and
Yeah.
to study theology and philosophy in a way that we can start understanding global religious phenomena
Yeah,
Mhm.
and
yeah.
looking at it from an academic and perspective,
Mm.
because a lot of stuff written about it is sort of biased and feeds to spiritualism, which is great. But for me, being a humanist and experiencing a lot of like people speaking in tongues and people being slain by the spirit,
Mm.
and literally seeing someone's eye grow in Thailand, like that's what my mind perceived when they were healing this person when I was in Thailand at a point. I had to make sense of that. So when I was at seminary, it was like, how do I make sense of all of these magical things, these surreal things that I've seen over the years? Now, being a humanist and not really believing in this, you could say, the spiritual. I'm trying to think of the right word. I guess you could just say the ideology of the Christian church,
Yeah.
this idea
Yeah.
that we have souls and a spirit and there's this afterlife. It
Yeah.
was like, how
Yeah.
do I make sense of that? And so that's what seminary was trying to pursue religion in an academic way. So,
I don't want to lose the story you just kind of glazed over about seeing
yeah,
somebody's eye grow in Thailand.
yeah,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. Tell us about that.
Yes.
I never heard about that. I hadn't heard that story before.
So we were staying at this brothel. Yeah. Good way to start. No, but I ended up in Thailand teaching English for 3 months. But of course, when you're an evangelical, you're not just teaching English; you are
Right.
converting. And so we were staying at this cafe, above this cafe, in these 2 rooms, me and 8 other people. And basically, when we got there, they were like, we can't have you more than a few days. And we said, where are we going to stay? And they said, well, there's a bar across the street. They have some beds. And we ended up at this bar and teaching at a school like 3 blocks from this bar in Pattaya. And we realized it was a brothel as well. So we just ended up babysitting these prostitutes' babies at night when
Mhm.
they were working, and teaching during the day English at this school right on the ocean. And it was a really interesting experience. But what happened was there was a homeless man that couldn't see. His eye was, you could say, like half of an eyeball. It wasn't fully
Wow.
formed. And we were with this guide and translator who basically prayed over him. And then he basically did what Jesus did with spitting in dirt and then rubbing it in his eye kind of situation.
Yeah.
And when you have this strong faith, it makes sense. We didn't think this was strange, when I was
Right.
17, 18, when I was seeing this. And he smeared it in his eye and he started rubbing around this socket. And I swear I saw the eye form.
Wow.
Wow.
And so again, is it my faith and my religious beliefs of 18 years leaning into that sight and what I experienced? Or did I actually see something? And so I witnessed a lot of this because I went on a lot of missions trips with Grace Chapel,
Yeah.
Lexington, right down the road. And I witnessed, I can't tell you how many things that were similar. Excuse me. And so, yeah, I did witness that, or experience something that made me think that I saw a man's eye grow.
So you saw
yeah.
people being healed in other places as well. This was something that
Yes, I saw people being healed. And again, this was normal for me.
Yeah.
And we used to go into Dorchester to the Pentecostal churches and witness this stuff all the time. But when you realize that you don't believe in the Christian ideology that correlates with these healings, you're put in a position of how does this make sense? And that's why seminary, and that's all of that. So,
and was that hard for you to sort of reconcile when you were first sort of having those beliefs shift and change, or were you sort of welcoming the transition?
It was almost like losing a parent. I don't know what it is to lose a parent, and I'm sorry if I correlate it to someone losing a parent. And and if that offends someone. But for me, it was there was a lot of stress and digestive like issues, like everything. Like it took a toll on my body.
Oh, really?
And I had to identify God as something else. And it was the first time I went to therapy. We talked about God as like Harvey, from the movie Harvey, the big, rabbit with Jimmy, Jimmy Stewart. And so I kind of had to separate myself from this idea of God that I grew up with to be able to get over it. It was a huge shift.
Yeah.
And it started because we had my daughter Auden, and one thing I wanted to do was just be truthful with her. And I couldn't honestly say that God existed. I couldn't say that God loved her. Like the things I was told when I was younger, God is this, God loves you, God takes care of these people. I couldn't say that to my daughter because I couldn't know for sure, which allowed me to, lean into my biblical hermeneutics in a different way. For a different purpose. And I slowly came out of that, believing that, I don't know if God exists. And
so
it was very hard.
Would you describe that as a kind of crisis in your life? It sounds like it kind of to me.
Yes. But... Yeah, no, yeah. It was. And the sad thing was my wife was going through it silently. And so I was like seeking help and being vocal about it with her. And I didn't know, but my wife was same experience because we met at college. We both started off in youth ministry. We both have minors in biblical studies, all of that stuff. And I didn't know. She was just so quiet and almost very stoic about it. And it's not until, recently that she's really, beginning to cope with it too. And it is a crisis. It really is. Especially when when your own parents think that you're, destined for hell. And you've been excommunicated from communities that were your life. They were,
so you were excommunicated from Grace?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was excommunicated before then because I called out and what they call elders, because he said things about women that were sexist, and I called him sexist at age 17. And they asked me to leave or to maybe join one of the sister churches. So I went to Grace Community instead, and which is a sister church in Chelmsford. And I attended there, and that's where I was a youth leader and then all that kind of stuff. But I was asked to leave Grace even before then. But my mentor, a really great guy, Mike Adams, he basically cut off communication with me. And I was basically, people called me a stray. And that's how I was referred to by that community, was a stray. So
you were exiled to Chelmsford.
And then I wanted to be exiled from Chelmsford. No, I'm joking.
Was all this kind of gradual, or did it happen? Was this while you were in seminary that you were kind of questioning?
So it was first at Eastern University in undergrad, right outside Philadelphia, that I started really questioning. And that's when, again, I heard about Unitarianism, and I heard about Universalism, and I realized that Christianity is a web. You know what I mean? It's not this target. It's not the answer. It spreads out. And the diversity wowed me at first. I was amazed by it. And that's what led me to start questioning more. And then through that, I became, a humanist, because I think morality and ethics are so important. It's something that I think is so important for kids to know, and just people to practice. And so I never lost sight of that. So being a humanist made the most sense. But it was gradual in the way of going from undergrad to seminary. I would say like 4 years. It was a 4-year process of stress and all that,
And then, so you land in Unitarian Universalism as a religious educator.
Yes, as a I guess more of an advisor, in the way of advising their youth team and their RE staff, and kind of workshopping a lot of the ideas they already had. But like up until this point, I worked in 2 youth groups. I was working in with cognitive behavioral analysis, and
Yeah.
I just started applying the things I learned from the evangelical youth group and practices, but also a lot of stuff that I learned from, like I said, cognitive behavioral analysis and things. And I just started shaping a program that I would want to use one day. Like if I was in this position and I had a program, this is what I would want the kids to really focus on. This is what happens developmentally with the kids at this age. This is what correlates with it. And so I found myself as this advisor, and did that for a summer. Yeah.
And then when was the first time you were brought on to a staff as an RE person?
Framingham.
Oh, fun fact, listeners. This is the church I grew up in that both Nate and I flowed through at different times. So when was that?
2015, I think, because I graduated seminary in 2014. We moved up north so my wife could start looking for jobs in academia. And I worked as a substitute and worked in like neurodiverse classrooms. And I soon started applying to a bunch of UU churches because I had this portfolio of lessons, right? And in seminary, I also had this class called Wonder, Wisdom, and Education. And you basically got to create your own program.
Oh, that's
you know, so I had all of this material. So I was just sending it around to like Concord and Framingham. And then, Framingham said, hey, we like you. So
that's fantastic.
Started there.
And sorry to jump around, but then have you always had storytelling sort of woven through all of this, or when did that start?
That started. It started with the story, The King Who Owned Too Many Things, which I think a lot of people know. I've told it a few times. That started the day before Auden was born.
Wow.
And I wrote that for her in a way of what kind of story would I want my kids to hear, you know?
Yeah.
And so I wrote that, and like I was a lyricist for a while. I was a musician for a while. So this idea of rhyming and kind of finding humor, but also reflecting on just the human condition and existence was like, I don't want to say it came naturally, but it was something that I was always pondering. So when I was like, oh, I want to form a child's story, it kind of just rolled out. And that was the first one. And I would say in seminary, I started writing them a bit more because I started writing these programs, like I said, for a class like Wonder, Wisdom, and Education. And so I was like, oh, this is a thing. I can write a story. And that's how it kind of formed. But I didn't really write poems so much. Well, I guess if lyrics are poems, but I didn't really write for kids or for myself until I would say seminary. It's
fun how parenting. So Lauren and I, when I was a minister of religious education many years ago, Lauren and I would just make up stories for the kids when they were little. and you know, little kids, they're just like, tell me another one. So we were just, it was like boot camp. It was like something from a Rocky sequel where we were just churning out story after story after story after story many, many times a night. And then by the time we were just creating them for church, they just came sort of naturally. But it was because we were parents all of a sudden. And so we just needed to start telling stories when we were in the car, and they would just be like, tell me another one. Tell me another one. It was fun. And I appreciate the rhyming that you do. It's a fun twist and a nice kind of balance. I think I did one kind of epic rhyming. I think it was like a Christmas pageant or something, but otherwise, I never do. So it's,
I need to pass this along to my undergrads who are taking this creative writing class. I should pass on to them. If you want to learn how to write a story, have kids.
That'll right. There we go. It's a sure way to fast track your tenure at Harvard. Cool. Well, that's fascinating. So then we get you, and then here you are. Here you are building this amazing program. So I wonder if just say a little bit about sort of the program that you started building and where we are now, and what do you think comes next? We've been in such a different phase of religious education at the church, especially in the pandemic, and there's so much potential. I'm just over and over again so aware of how much creativity and how many new things we could all be building together. So if you could just say a little bit about kind of where we are now and what might be coming
Yeah.
next.
Yeah. So right now we're in an interesting position where we built a website, fcbcre.com,
Check it
and
out.
we're
Check it out. Check
trying
it out.
yeah and we're trying to orchestrate something that serves both parents and kids. So we have lessons and we have programming like building bridges, and but at the same time we have resources like recommendations for parents and other websites people can check out. So we're trying to keep this thing active online, and that's quite a challenge because some things are in person now, some things are online. Kids are burnt out, and so we're trying to offer something that allows people just to, if they want to be involved, not to fully commit, but just check out the website, find what works for them. And so that's kind of where we are right now, and that's not exactly where we want to be, let's say 2 years from now, especially if we're back in person, or a year from now. So what we want to do is kind of keep that website as a place of resources, of lessons, and a place of recommendations like books and films for families and parents. But we kind of want to move forward and kind of forming workshops for the kids, to be honest, and kind of making it so kids kind of dial into what they want to learn about. So instead of just saying, grades 1 through 3, they're studying this, grades 4 through 6 are studying this, and we're following these pillars of curriculum, we kind of want to create workshops, and where the kids find interest, that's what they tap into. So maybe offer 2 workshops in the fall, 2 workshops in the spring. And I know as adults, when we think of workshops, we're thinking of something very specific. But as kids, it's going to be a lot different for them. But I think it's tailoring to their interests, but also supplying the information and the I guess lessons and things that we want the kids to learn already, whether it be about social justice or world religions or UU history. Like, we would implement that stuff into the workshops. But I see it kind of taking a different form, because when I joined, we had classrooms and it was like, these 2 grades learn this at this time of year, these 2 grades learn that, or this subject at this time of year. And it worked, all right, but you could see that the kids weren't really dialed in, and it wasn't their classroom in a way. It was kind of like, here's this information, we're passing it on to you, which can be a beautiful thing, but at the same time, for kids, it's just like, you're just tossing random facts at me. Why do I care about this?
Right.
And so when we joined, we started asking kids what they wanted to hear about within these subjects. So we started tailoring the lessons to more of stuff that interests them, which we worked out for a while. But then, not a lot of people were signing up to teach, and a lot of people were getting burnt out. And so I think after this pandemic, the idea of doing a workshop and having a person or 2 who specialize in an area kind of teach these kids, makes more sense than, just kind of beating this dead horse of Sunday school. And of course, this idea of death of Sunday school is something that comes up every decade or 2, right?
Right.
And for us, it's just like, we want to kind of get out of that loop and be like, yeah, it's Sunday school, but it's not.
So one of the other questions that we've been asking everybody is around the principles and sources. So if you have a favorite principle, it's like a fun little education moment. So if you have a favorite principle, what is that and why?
Yeah. To be honest, I do. I have, I think, 2 favorite principles, and
Okay.
my favorite is the 4th, which is free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And I think that's partly due because of my story of not really having freedom to search and just being told what existence is, what God is. And so I think it's so important for kids to understand that their thoughts aren't bad, that their thoughts aren't what's the word, small. And as a kid, I thought that if I would define God as something other than my parents would, it was bad. And that's my ideas were just small in thought, and they don't compare to what an adult's are. And I think having something like the fourth principle allows kids to kind of be like, wow, it's a journey.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
supposed to have the answers right now. And my thoughts are can be appreciated, you know? And I think that's why it's really important to me. And I think, especially having an 11-year-old right now who's really thinking about, the human condition and what it means to exist and stuff.
Yeah.
It's so freeing to be able, as a parent, to be like, yeah, that makes sense, or, oh, I see your perspective, or
Right.
did you consider this, and kind of having a dialogue, because it's her journey. It's not, again, me telling her what truth is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because where I find meaning is going to be most likely somewhere different, off the map, compared to like where Auden, my daughter, finds meaning. And I think that's so important to instill that and teach that.
Yeah.
And of course,
yeah.
Oh, sorry. What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, especially now, this moment
course.
that we're all living in is like so many absolutes shared and sort of trumpeted in the public square. So being able to lift up, it's going to keep changing. The search for meaning is kind of ongoing. And, like, especially for kids, being able to say, what and what you figure out matters.
Yeah, exactly. And I think something important, it kind of lines up with the idea that psychologically we're all the ages we've ever been.
Yeah.
And understanding that the search for truth is a journey, and you don't have to define something as this moment in time. Like for us, or when I was evangelical, it was like when I was baptized, that was truth. And when I did this at this age, that's we would always kind of put these pins in what we've done and define them as like, oh, that's when I earned more brownie points as a Christian. Continue. And it's not so much a journey. It was just kind of acquiring these accolades at different points in our life, and then looking at ourselves as being more wise due to our age and stuff. And I think it's really important to remember that psychologically we're all the ages we've ever been. And that's why we have those big, large feelings, is because we're tapping into 3-year-old,
absolutely.
Sam and Chris and Nate and stuff like that. And there's truth in that, not just in what we achieve at a certain age and anyways, so
no, that's great.
There's a tangent, but yes.
And how about you said there was a source too that you liked.
Yes. The idea that humanist teachings, which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the result of science, and warn against, idolatries of the mind and spirit.
Nice.
Yes.
I love how these are phrased. Idolatries of
the mind and spirit.
Idolatries.
What does that mean, actually? Idolatries of the mind. I hadn't looked at that phrasing closely before now. And warn us against idolatries of the mind and spirit. Idolatries of the spirit, I get. That's like golden calves and stuff, right? But what is idolatries of the mind? What does that mean to you?
That's a really good question. I would have to think about it more, but for me, mind and spirit are one. Because the idea of spirit doesn't make much sense to me, especially as a humanist. So
sure.
I think it's funny that spirit is part of it. For me, it's mind and spirit are the same thing. There's this line of a lyric that says, "To use your mind is to use your soul," and and I've always really admired that. So I think the idolatries of the spirit are one and the same, to be honest. So so I don't know if I'm challenging the wording of the source, but maybe the philosophical deconstruction of it,
But then what would be the idolatry of the mind?
Well, I'm just wondering if, that source is asking us to be skeptical, but skeptical of creations of the mind as well as creations of the spirit, as those two things were more traditionally understood. So not just sort of blindly believing in certain fixed spiritual ideas, but also blindly believing in certain intellectual ideas that, for example, I think of certain very dogmatic atheists who take quite reductionist views of human nature. We're just cells and atoms and so forth.
Yeah.
And there are lots of gradations. There are lots of variations and gradations of those kinds of reductive ideas. But I find that the most extreme versions of them, of those very reductive views of what we are as human beings, I think that becomes a kind of idolatry of the mind, in my view, because it becomes a way of sort of, arguing away any kind of human freedom or human responsibility or morality, and it becomes I think
you even see it with anti-theists compared to people that are non-theists, right? This idea of being anti of something is idolatry of the mind. Exactly. I can see it like that, and never mind. I was going to quote Camus, and then I realized how pretentious that sounded.
No, do it.
No.
Drop a little Camus.
No. It's the stance of Camus is the opposite of this, in the way of kind of the teaching of being skeptical of everything, or that you need to find meaning. Not meaning is given to you. This idea that, because I think idolatry of the mind is as I guess could be understood as knowing or having certainty of something, right? And being convinced to
exactly.
a place of blind faith. And for Camus, it's kind of the opposite. It's just like, no, meaning is something that one must find. And it's not something just given, and it's not something you can just kind of possess. Anyways, I'm going to backpedal a little bit.
No, that makes sense.
No. Yeah.
So before you go, we have a little bit of a mailbag segment that we usually do after the guest has left. But my wife snuck in our first mailbag question, which was a follow-up from a theology class that Sam was a part of, but we thought it would be fun to hear from you on this too, Nate. And apparently in this theology class, Sam was talking about the sources of consolation in Unitarian Universalism. And she was asking, where are the sources of consolation in Unitarian Universalism? Partially because she thought that until we're clear about that, the journey towards sort of healing some of the racial divides that we've had, healing some of our history, will be complicated. So it's a theological task for us to really articulate and know where the sources of consolation are. So I wanted to share that very first question of the mailbag. And if any of you listening have any questions, you can email me, minister@uubelmont.org, or my long last name email that many of you had. And we'll answer them here on the pod. But what do you guys think? Where's the consolation in Unitarian Universalism?
Well, I got a few thoughts about this. Shall I go first? So, I'm interested where Lauren goes with this. I mean, when I remember talking about that in Lauren's seminar, and my suggestion at the time was that since Unitarian Universalism, for many of us now, lacks an afterlife, by no means for all of us. The search for consolation for our mortality and for our pain is something profound in religion. And so where do we find it within Unitarian Universalism? And some people do find it in the idea of an afterlife. But I think there's also consolation to be found, for example, in our sense of loneliness, of unmeaning in our society, in our very individualized and atomized society. There's a consolation to be found in the discovery or rediscovery that leading kind of a spiritual life in community with others can assist you to bring about lasting change in bettering the world and bettering yourself. That it's not all is not lost. In other words, sometimes when you're in a bad place, sort of emotionally and spiritually, you think all is lost in some sense or other, but then you rediscover your community, in this case our UU community, and you find that spiritual striving together can change the world, and that's, for me, that's consoling. That better things are possible. Yeah,
on sort of alongside that, I remember at the very beginning of the pandemic, something just a couple of weeks before we shut down, Rebecca Henke died. So these are folks who have been at the church a really long time, and just always a couple, always a unit. I met them as part of the lay pastoral care team, and just lovely, incredible people. And, you know, James has talked a lot publicly, her widow, just about how hard it was that he was grieving her and didn't have the embrace of community. You know, like he couldn't come the Sunday after and just be swarmed with people, you know, like have people reaching out to him. I mean, obviously we were reaching out, people were sending cards, we were bringing food, but just that kind of enveloping community made all the difference. And to not have that was really hard. So I think that to me is part of where we have consolation, is in that connectedness.
Yes.
Is in that, you know, network that we create.
Yeah, and partly because, you know, when we are bereaved, we find that community and it's consoling, but also many of us in UU world are bereaved of our former faiths, of our former religions, as we were talking about with Nate, and that can be a grieving process too, losing our faith and trying to find a new one. Yeah.
I think it happens in communities that are active and are self-aware. And you don't find that in all communities, and I think that could be an issue. And I think, you know, that's what Lauren's even pointing to too, in a way of like people that are truly hurt. It's like people need to understand why people are hurt and be active in knowing how to console, to listen typically, right? And just be there. And so I think for UUism to be a source of, you know, consolation, you have to be active, self-aware, and present.
Right.
And I think for our community, that's something we have to ask. Like, I know when in 2016, when, you know, Trump won the election, we had a place for people to go immediately where they could just be frustrated and mourn for the country. And we had people kind of just break off in groups and just listen to each other and like hold each other.
Yeah.
And I think that needs to be more regular in some ways, right?
Yeah.
And that's truly beautiful, and also that's what consolation is, right? And when we don't have the source of all true consolation and the infinite love of God, which is what, you know, I was told we need to find it in community, and for that to happen, we need a community to be active, self-aware, and present. And that's what I think.
Appreciate that, and I think it's interesting too, especially when you look at, you know, systemic oppression and racism, or like environmental degradation. These kind of, you know, we understand how to do it when somebody's died, you know, like instinctively, but also we're a very compassionate, empathic, loving church, right? So we'll swoop around somebody when they've died, but that's a lot, you know, kind of, we're more accustomed to that, and we have a little more skill in supporting that. And it's hard to give a casserole to the climate change, you know what I mean? And so part of the consolation is that these same skills that we're kind of good at, you know, surrounding people when they're grieving, we're kind of a little more, we understand that process a little better, but the same kind of grieving and the same kind of pastoral connection, in addition to all of the rabble rousing and organizing that we have to do, you know, is really called for in these larger, more complicated questions around, you know, systemic oppression and racism. It's like, how do we create the space for that same kind of consolation around questions around the environment and, you know, climate change and these huge, difficult challenges that we're facing. We're going to be having our wonderful FCB Green team is going to be hosting and helping us have a conversation around becoming carbon neutral by 2035. And part of that conversation is to be able to have space to really let in the climate crisis that we're in the midst of, to really be able to console one another while looking out with clear eyes at these challenges in front of us, you know, these huge ones. And we're really ready for it, I think, because of, you know, all the stuff that we've been talking about, because of the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, because of all of our, you know, because of all of our openness. Anyway, so I think it's a skill and it's a challenge and it's a really good one. Look at that.
Yeah.
Good question.
Good job.
Yeah.
Touche. Well, I was gonna say too, just from what Lauren was the question Lauren was asking, or just what you kind of brought this mailbag question. I think when we look at people of color and we look at suppression, and too often we want people of color to be our teachers and educators, and when we invite them into our community, it's teach us, tell us, and we want to be confirmed from like the actions we're doing, and I think that can be toxic.
Yeah.
In the way of if we want to be a place of consultation to people, the Black community, we need to be a place where we listen and not expect to be taught. Listen to the uncomfortable truths and listen to things that we may not hear because it doesn't really confirm the action and things we've been doing too. And I think that's where it really starts. And like when I was working with the Anti-Racism Institute, in Philadelphia, that's like the first step we would tell people is you have to hear the hard truths first, because that's the only time when people actually feel seen, and feel heard. And then from there, that's where healing comes. That's where people can find comfort. And sometimes it takes us not expecting to have these engagements be a time of us learning, and just more of us listening and hearing these things.
That's good.
So good to have you, man. And I am
of course,
deeply, deeply grateful again for everything that you bring to the team, but especially just the heroic service in this last year and a half. You really went just above and beyond, over and over and over. And I think only Ian probably, and I know the extent to which you did. So many technical challenges, so many just absurdly long days, but I am deeply, deeply, deeply grateful. And I know that as much as it is a challenge right now, family ministry is complicated in this moment, but I have so much faith in everything that we're building, everything that you've already built, and this next phase of all that we're going to get to do together. And I'm so grateful to have you on the team, man.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
We appreciate you, Nate.
Oh, thank you, Sam.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. And be gone from the pod.
What an outro. Okay.
Awesome.
All right,
great.
Thanks, man. All right, Sam. Wasn't that good?
That was awesome.
We are getting so good at this. Let's just call it. No, people are so fascinating.
I know.
This was our idea going in, and we were like, people just all have incredible stories to share. And it's so far been so true. It's been really, really, really fascinating. So thanks, everybody, for listening. And do send us in any questions you have for Sam or I to the mailbag. You can email them to either of us if you have our emails, or minister@uubelmont.org. We're always excited to hear from you. And if there's anybody who you'd love to have on the pod, let us know. But we have another couple guests lined up, and we'll keep doing it. This has been really, really fun. So thanks for listening. And thank you, Sam. As always, this is a real joy to
Thank you,
do
Chris.
this with you.
This is great.
All right. Have wonderful weeks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.